Welcome back to the PFF NFL show here on the preview edition of the program. I'm Trevor Sikkema. That is Carmen Vitali here with you guys to preview every single game of Week 12 in the NFL. Week 12. It feels like we've done so much, and yet it does still feel like it's flying by. I hate to be cliche. Sometimes I hate when people say that, but like it really does feel that way once we get into the holidays. I know that obviously the playoffs are going to be here just like that. Carmen, I would ask you how you're doing. Right before we recorded, you're like, whew, I'm on fumes today a little bit. You just got back from Chicago watching the Packers and the Bears. How was the game, by the way?
It was the most entertaining Bears-Packers game that I've personally covered. So that was good. It was heartbreaking for Chicago fans. I don't want to minimize that, but there were a lot of good things to take away. It wasn't all doom and gloom. And I mean, it's just a crazy thing that the Bears have lost at the last second on like fluke plays multiple times this season. I had a tweet ready to go, Trev, where I was like, the Bears pulled off the unthinkable. They got the boost they needed.
No, not the tweet. Not the written out tweet.
I wrote it out, but I didn't send it because I was like, okay, just relax. There's still one more very crucial thing that needs to happen for the Bears to win this. And despite the fact that it was a textbook, answer as far as the drive goes by Caleb Williams, got them within Cairo Santos's range. Mm-hmm. You're like, could you have maybe ran one more play, gotten a couple extra yards? Sure. But Cairo Santos said after the game, like, that doesn't really change anything about the way he kicks. That's well within his range as it was. So a couple yards wouldn't have necessarily made a difference. Although maybe they could have put it on the right hash, which is where he likes to kick from rather than the left one. Maybe he wouldn't have missed. I don't know. But
it was tough. It was tough.
Yeah, it was. I didn't. And so then I was like, oh, no, I guess I'm not sending it. Green Bay survives. Matt LaFleur survives his perfect record against Chicago.
So we were watching that game as we watch every game in the PFF office, and Dalton Wasserman, who's my co-host for the Grades Release show, he was adamant the entire time. He was like, no. Like the whole second half, he's like, no, Chicago will lose this game by 1 point. He's like, Chicago will lose this game by 1 point. And we're like, all right, Dalton, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And, Bears end up scoring a touchdown. They end up going up 19-14. And we're sitting there and we're kind of like looking at him. We're like, uh-oh. Because now
Nostradamus over here.
Because now we all knew what was going to happen. Green Bay was going to score again at some point.
Yes.
And then it was just a matter of, okay, do they make the 2-point conversion? Can Chicago end up making a game-winning field goal? And obviously they go for 2. They don't get it. It's literally 1 point and then the missed field goal. And Dalton was just screaming, I told you so, when all of that happened. So kudos to Dalton. He absolutely nailed it. We're going to talk about the Bears. We're going to dig into that performance for both sides as we kind of preview both of their games that we have upcoming this week, plus every single other game. If you want to see the PFF statistics that we're going to talk about here on the show, the best way you can do that, getting yourself a PFF Plus subscription. Go to pff.com or subscribe.pff.com. Get you a subscription. You can follow along with the show. You can do your own research, but it's so much more than that. It's not just game previews. It's the fantasy football tools. It's the free agency tools once we get into the offseason, and then the Unlocked Mock Draft Simulator as well. By the way, PFF Mock Draft Simulator now has over 280 players on the big board and in the database for you to draft, which means you can do 7-round mock drafts now. So you do that, you go over to pff.com. Let's start, as we always do, with Thursday Night Football. Another divisional Thursday Night Football here. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers going on their AFC North tour finally.
They sure are.
Now they're going to Cleveland. And they're taking on the Cleveland Browns. Steelers are coming off of a victory against the Baltimore Ravens. The Browns are coming off of a loss against the New Orleans Saints. Carmen, your matchup that matters here in this game. What do you got?
I really do think that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to go the way of their rushing attack, and Najee Harris is obviously the biggest part of that. And it's because he's so physical. He embodies absolutely everything that you want out of a running back in Pittsburgh, where you do play that physical brand of football where, it's defense first and then you're going to ground and pound. And even though you now have a Russell Wilson who is throwing the ball down the field like it's 3 years ago, Najee Harris has 46 missed tackles forced on runs, and that ranks second in the league. And he's going against the Browns rushing defense that is struggling a little bit. 14 rushing touchdowns. It's tied for the fourth most in the league that they've led up. 42 rushes. This is the kicker. 42 rushes of 10 or more yards allowed. That's also fourth most. So they're a bottom 5 rushing defense in a lot of ways. And not only do you have to worry about Najee Harris, but if we're judging off of this last game, you might have to worry about Justin Fields too. And part of me was like, yeah, like why did it take so long? Because we went into this season when we thought that Russell Wilson was going to be the starter before that injury, that all right, if Russ is the starter, maybe they'll still have some packages for Fields. I think that was a pretty common sentiment because like why wouldn't you do that? He provides the threat of absolutely everything between rushing the ball, he can hand it off, he can throw the ball. That just adds such a fun dynamic to your offense. What's taken so long? And then you just mentioned it, they're opening up division play. This is something that they're starting to get on tape for their division opponents that they are now about to see. They have 4 straight division games coming, like including this last one. So I really think that there is going to be something to Justin Fields now working his way into these packages offensively, where we only saw 3 plays last game, but I do think that we're going to see an uptick in that just because of all of the problems that he could present.
I do agree with you that I feel as though it was only sort of a matter of time before they got him in there. I wonder if it was a situation where you don't want to have the package plays in there quite yet because you really want to like entrench Russell Wilson as the starter, right? You don't want this like, okay, well, you know, you don't want it to be doubt that's in either of these quarterbacks' minds, right? The phrase is if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. I don't know if I totally believe that. Sometimes, obviously, it comes to fruition, and I do think there's a little bit of truth to that if you don't handle it the right way. I'm pretty comfortable trusting Mike Tomlin at this point for this entire situation, this entire season, for how he's handled this, and it's worked out beautifully for the Pittsburgh Steelers. For my matchup that matters, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh's defense, and it's a really good defense, especially up front. We've talked about the guys in the front 4 that are playing very well. The linebacker level, Patrick Queen had a great game last week. Peyton Wilson did as well, their rookie linebacker. But specifically in the secondary, I think this is an interesting test for them going up against the Browns because Jameis, as we know, is not afraid to let it fly. Jameis's average depth of target this year is above 10 yards per pass. It's 10.8 of an average depth of target. When you are looking at the Steelers' defensive backs so far this season, their coverage grade drops from a 60.6 if you just include all throws, all the way down to a 33.1 if you just go with throws that are 10 yards or more, which we know Jameis is going to have quite a bit of in this game. Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, all of them have coverage grades below 45 when it comes to those passes beyond 10 yards. So this is an interesting matchup here because it's a recipe for what the Browns and Jameis naturally are going to want to do. We even saw it last week against New Orleans. Obviously, New Orleans wins that game, and it's a big Taysom Hill game, and it was kind of a runaway for them. But Jameis almost threw for 400 yards in that game. So it was just a matter of the fact that their defense could not hold New Orleans and what they were doing. I think it's going to be a little bit more low scoring this time around in this matchup. And because of that, if you give up a couple of bombs, well, all of a sudden now the Browns are right there when it's all said and done, or especially when we get down into the fourth quarter. So I think this game will be a little bit closer because of that reason. The Steelers just haven't defended those deeper passes very well this season. On the other side of things, my plus factor here in this game before we get to yours is I'm going to call out Denzel Ward, the cornerback for the Cleveland Browns. He's going to be very important in this game because the Steelers' offense, especially when passing, has just been George Pickens, and then we don't really know. Like some weeks it's been nobody. Sometimes it's been Mike Williams. Sometimes it's been, like a Pat Freiermuth or a Calvin Austin or something, but it's never a consistent player. So you can't really depend on another wide receiver outside of George Pickens. Well, what's George Pickens also done really well this season? Been on the opposite end of some Russell Wilson moonballs, right? Those deeper throws as well. Denzel Ward this season, an elite 90.1 coverage grade on throws of 10 yards or more. He's also on a bit of a hot streak. Last week, a 92.4 coverage grade from him. So he's one of the better corners in the league. He's playing really well, and he's been great when it comes to defending that deep pass. So if you can't connect on a couple of those moon balls to George Pickens, what are the Steelers in terms of the passing offense? I think that's a plus factor in this one. If Denzel Ward can shut down Pickens or at least limit him quite a bit, then all of a sudden, again, you throw in what I talked about with Jameis versus the Steelers secondary. this could be a much closer game than people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, and actually mine goes right along with it because it's not necessarily a single player in George Pickens, but it's just how the Browns contend with the deep pass because we know that Russell Wilson wants to throw it deep. He's done it more often than not to George Pickens, but he does have Mike Williams in that role as well. Mike Williams is capable of running down the field and catching one of those moon balls too. So what the Browns defense specifically can do against those explosive plays, can they limit those? Especially when you consider that George Pickens leads the league in catches on 20 or more yard throws. He's got 12 of them this year. That ranks first. He's got 407 yards on those types of throws. Again, leads the league in that. So that's obviously a main component of their offense. And if you do take that point, what are you left with? And that's a place where the Browns can really see and the Browns defense can really limit what this Pittsburgh offense wants to do.
Dave Solfaro, our researcher / just say every week, do everything guy at PFF, he sent me this stat while we were talking about this. Only quarterback with 15 or more deep pass attempts without having a turnover-worthy play is Russell Wilson. So that is a major part of their offense, and they absolutely love to go to it. Again, if Denzel Ward can step up, I think that's a big difference maker here. Let's fast forward to the 1 p.m. games. Let's talk about Chiefs at Panthers. The Chiefs, for the first time this year, coming off a loss. They're traveling to Carolina. Carolina is playing much better lately. Is it enough to challenge or give the defending Super Bowl champs a little bit of trouble? What are you going with here as your matchup that matters, Carmen?
Yeah, no, I mean, I fully expect the Chiefs to get right back on track. And I predicted that the Bills would be the ones to kind of snap that streak of the Chiefs. And in some ways, I think it's kind of a good thing for the Chiefs. You can't just go through the rest of the season with the pressure of having to remain undefeated and wanting to be that team. I mean, now they can just play as freely as they want. I mean, they are all but a playoff lock. I have them going to the Super Bowl. I picked that at the beginning of the year because I just refuse to bet against Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid on the whole throughout a season. But yeah, I think that they are going to kind of be renewed in a lot of ways and just be able to play super free. And that's really bad news for the Carolina Panthers. I want to look at the defensive side of the ball for the Chiefs, though. And with that defense led by Spags, that has just continually gone a little bit underrated, if that's even possible, with anything around the Kansas City Chiefs, because they are going against what is kind of a sneaky strength of the Carolina Panthers, even with Ike Ekwonu having been out. The Panthers O-line has gotten tremendously better and considerably throughout this season.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, there were some investments made into the offensive line, whether that was players or coaching even. You got the coaches over from the Buccaneers who have historically always had really good offensive lines.
Right.
The run game's another story, but the offensive lines have been very good. That has now spilled over into Carolina. And so you have the 8th best PFF grade overall for this offensive line at a 76.4. Pass blocking and run blocking, they are both top 10 too. 74.4 pass blocking grade, 74.6 run blocking grade, 77 pressures allowed in pass protection. That's actually the 7th fewest, which again, this is completely different than what we were talking about last year with the Carolina Panthers offensive line. So that going against, though, you run into Chris Jones, you run into George Karlaftis. Chris Jones has 46 pressures this year. George Karlaftis 35. They lead the Chiefs in pressures. Obviously, we know that Spags knows how to dial it up, whether that is with the blitz or with trying to get pressure with 4. I fully expect this to be a really big battle, an uphill battle for the Panthers offensive line. But I did want to shout them out because they are so improved year over year this year.
I do. No, I think that is a good shout out. And it's not like it was just a couple of games here to start the season. They've been playing a little bit better. It has been a full season thing for them to this point. And so the offensive line in Carolina in much better hands than it was last year. There's no doubt about it. My matchup that matters, I think something interesting that happened with Buffalo last week is they were really able to go after Najee Johnson, who is the Chiefs cornerback, who is starting for Jalen Watson, who is now out for the season. I think he's officially out for the season. If not like the Super Bowl, I guess maybe he could come back. But with Najee Johnson out there, he was targeted 10 times, gave up 7 catches, over 70 yards, and a touchdown. Like Buffalo picked on him with a lot of different types of receivers. Now, okay, I get it. Buffalo's offense more potent than Carolina's. There's no doubt about it. Certainly, when you look at the quarterback play overall, I'm not. I don't think I'm really insulting anybody by saying that Josh Allen is better than Bryce Young. And then the receiver weapons that you have for Buffalo are gelling more than what we have seen from the Panthers. Although the Panthers have been playing better since Bryce Young has been playing better over the last couple of weeks. So you got Jalen Coker, you got Xavier Legette, you got Jatavian Sanders, their young tight end, who's stepping up as well. Can they sort of go after that weakness again for the Kansas City Chiefs? Trent McDuffie's fantastic. Obviously, the other corners that they have are good, but Johnson was such a weak spot for them. Are they going to continue to go out and just say, hey, you got to match up against these guys and you got to be able to hold up a little bit better? Or are the Chiefs going to maybe spend a little bit more resources in the secondary, have some more guys in coverage, really be able to figure that out? Because last week it just was not good enough, and Buffalo was really to pick on Johnson specifically. Can Carolina kind of do the same thing? Because now it's sort of, the trade deadline is passed. Who is on the team is on the team, and I think that's a major matchup in this one. If Carolina can really figure out how to attack a secondary with the Chiefs that has been wobbly, especially last week, I think really let them down in a particular spot. What was your plus factor for this game?
Yeah, I'm going to pick on one wide receiver in particular for the Panthers because, again, this is an uphill battle for the Panthers. So when there's these kind of what look like lopsided matchups, I always kind of try to hone in on something that could make a difference for the underdog. And that's the Carolina Panthers here, and it's Jalen Coker because he's got the most catches for the Panthers that travel over 15 or more yards. He's got 10 of them this season, and you said it before, Bryce Young looks better than he really has in the league as a Carolina Panther, and he looks like he's having a little bit more fun. He's got a little bit of confidence. He is trying to push the ball down the field. He's not afraid to do that right now, and that has to keep up if you're going to be productive against this team. And I really do think that there's something to the budding relationship with Jalen Coker. And then how does he do and how does he fare on third and fourth down? I think in particular is a huge one, just given the fact that the Panthers are dead last in third and fourth down conversion percentage at 32.8, I believe, or 32.6. That's something that needs to get better. Obviously, you need to sustain drives. You need to, push the ball down the field. You need to score, do all that kind of stuff. You can't do that if you're not converting third downs and fourth downs for that matter. So can Jalen Coker be part of that for Bryce Young and this offense and get something going against one of the league's best defenses?
Best way to defend Patrick Mahomes, as they say, is to keep him on the sideline.
Keep him off the field.
Converting those third and fourth downs, I think, are paramount, no doubt about it. It's got to be probably their best day at the office that we've seen so far this year at converting on those downs. For my plus factor, I'll go with sort of an obvious one here. There's a lot of different ones. I think you shouted out a couple that are really good, but Travis Kelce in particular, because I look at this matchup and, well, I just look at the season overall for Travis Kelce, and it's no secret that he's not having a great year. I think it's a career low in receiving grade. It's a career low in yards per route run. It's a career low in touchdowns. And I'm talking about like projections for a 17-game season. Like he's projected to finish career lows in all of those categories. Can Travis Kelce really be enough? And if I think a lot of people looked at Travis Kelce's struggles earlier in the year and they were like, I mean, come on, he's coming off of back-to-back titles. They know they're going to make the playoffs. They know they're going to be a high seed. Travis Kelce will be able to turn it on when it matters. I'm not saying that like week 12, okay, now it matters. Now their backs are against the wall, but this is a team that is now 9-1. The Buffalo Bills now have the tiebreaker over them. The Buffalo Bills are sitting there at 9-2. So you can't exactly like drop games because Buffalo is going to overtake you. They're going to they'll probably get the 1 seed if they end up doing that. And then if you're Kansas City, you really want to go to Buffalo when you're in the playoffs? I know people are going to say they've been to Buffalo before in the playoffs and they have won, but very clearly where they were at that point in time with the Chiefs and that team and where the Bills were, it's very different. Bills are playing really good football. Josh Allen in particular is playing fantastic football. They're about as balanced as you could possibly be in offense. They are limiting quarterbacks as well as you possibly could. And Kansas City, it sometimes looks tough for them to be the offense that we expect them to be with Patrick Mahomes. So all of that to say, you don't have all this wiggle room, and you could be a team that maybe is in the playoffs in a lower seed than you think. You might be having 1 or 2 more road games before you get to the Super Bowl and defend that Super Bowl title. Travis Kelce's going to be a big piece for that, is what I'm trying to say. And if we think that he is going to get back to form, So really impact this team in such a manner where they're able to continue to keep hold of the 1 seed and get home field advantage throughout the playoffs. This, to me, is a game where he's got to show up. This is a game where he's got to, like a couple weeks ago, double-digit targets, 7, 8, 9 receptions, something like that, close to 100 yards receiving. Can you be a mainstay of this game plan? Because it feels like it has been way too hot and cold for Travis Kelce up to this point. So it's more of a big picture thing because, let's face it, Carolina's going to be picking in the top 5, and the Chiefs are going to make the playoffs. So no matter really what happens in this game, obviously a loss for Kansas City is a big deal for seeding, like I mentioned. But bigger picture, I'm thinking bigger picture. What's the bigger takeaway here? And it's the fact that if Travis Kelce can't really get it going against a Carolina defense, I'm all of a sudden going to be pretty worried that he's just going to be able to turn it on when it matters most, last couple of games of the regular season and then into the playoffs. I don't know if that's nearly as much of a guarantee as people were thinking that it was when he was struggling earlier in the season. Vikings Bears, next game I want to touch on. Sure. So we'll talk some of those high-level takeaways from the Bears-Packers game that we started talking about at the beginning of the show. Carmen, I will let you have the floor first. What is your matchup that matters here with the Vikings traveling to Chicago?
Yeah, it's a really overarching one. It's Thomas Brown, the Bears' new offensive play caller, against Brian Flores. And that has to be it, because for as encouraging as things were against the Green Bay Packers, again, a divisional opponent, the divisional opponent, if you're a Bears fan, I mean, these are the big bad Packers, that team in the North that no one wants to see, that just have the Bears number and have. Jordan Love has been transferred the deed to Soldier Field and the Bears from Aaron Rodgers, and it has not lost to them yet as a starting quarterback. But Thomas Brown was able to do so many good things in such a short amount of time for Chicago once they fired Shane Waldron. They did not they fired him on Tuesday. So you're already losing 24 to 36 hours at that point, at least publicly. And that matters when you're trying to come up with not only a game plan, but you're trying to right the entire ship at this point, with a playbook that is already installed. So there was already handcuffs on you if you're Thomas Brown trying to figure out, all right, how can I operate within this playbook that these guys already have the installs, but then utilize them a little bit more correctly. And what we saw on Sunday against the Bears was there was a lot more quick passes, a lot more quick reads for Caleb Williams. He was a little bit more willing to use his legs, which Caleb told us afterwards was really because he just saw lanes opening up, run lanes opening up, more so than he had previously. And the biggest thing for me was the increased rate of motion, the pre-snap motion that the Bears had been lacking up until that point. They had the 3rd fewest motion snaps in the first 10 weeks of the season, despite staying in 11 personnel, which is very indicative of the Sean McVay tree offense, the 11th highest rate in the league. They weren't varying their personnel groups, but then they also weren't putting any window dressing on those personnel groups. So pre-snap motion just lets you determine so many different things prior to the snap. It can gain you leverage. It can get safety's eyes out of place and out of position. It can, turn things on the defense's heels if you're the offense, and it can also tell the quarterback so many different things. It can indicate man versus zone. It can indicate so many things for the quarterback so that he knows more of what to expect post snap. And that's what we saw with Thomas Brown. The Bears used motion at the 4th highest rate then in the league through the Sunday's games this past week. So that was immediately something that was completely different. You saw it even early on in the game because the Bears got almost back. I don't think it was back-to-back, but they were penalties very close together that were like either illegal shifts or illegal motions. And you were like, oh man, this team just isn't used to this yet. And you saw it get better as the game went on. So now you're going against a very complex defense that doesn't behave how traditional defenses do. Your players don't behave in traditional defensive roles in Brian Flores' defense. You have all of these guys. You have guys dropping into coverage you're not expecting. You have guys up on the line you're not expecting. You have guys coming in on pressure or not. It's a whirlwind, and it puts teams, it puts quarterbacks in a blender, especially if you're not used to seeing NFL defenses, which Caleb Williams is still young. It's still his first season. He hasn't seen a lot when it comes to all of this kind of sophisticated stuff. So how much information can you get him if you're Thomas Brown before the snap, which is not only what you're telling him in the headset, but it's also, keeping up that rate of motion and making adjustments as you go based on what you're seeing from the defense and how they're playing you. That's, again, something that was lacking under Shane Waldron. So this is a battle between what Thomas Brown can do and adjust to now that there is film of him as the Bears play caller. Can he continue to evolve? Can you continue to self-scout and then adjust in game against a defense that you're going to need to do it against?
Yeah, I mean, one, I think that was all very beautifully said, and I'm going to kind of piggyback off a couple of that because that is also my matchup that matters. This sucks for Caleb. I mean, there's no other way around it. This matchup sucks for Caleb Williams, and if he plays well in this environment against the Minnesota Vikings and the Brian Flores defense, even though it is at home, man, that is a major hat tip to him going in the right direction, him having a lot of confidence in Thomas Brown as the play caller, because you're right. A lot of things were different. They were doing a lot more pre-snap motion, but it's more than that too. They were under center, I think the third most snaps of any game that they had up to this point in the season. They were tied for first in most play action snaps for a single game at this point in the season. So it was the third fastest time to throw for Caleb Williams. So all in all, it just looked different. The whole thing looked different, and it looked a lot more like what we have been asking. Make things a little bit simpler for him, okay? Right. Don't make him sit here with no pre-snap motion, with nothing under center, with no threat of play action, and have him sit back and try to diagnose defenses pre and post snap within the first 2 seconds of a play. Why are you doing that? The whole scouting report with Caleb Williams was going to be what? It's got to look different than it did at USC. There were some parts of the USC game that you would have loved to marry into the NFL, and he gives you that talent level to be able to do that. But you knew he wasn't going to be able to just sit back there for 4, 5, 6 seconds and then escape and then just continue to look down the field. It doesn't really work in the NFL. It's got to be more structured than that. You have to give him help. And it did not feel like Shane Waldron was giving him help. And obviously it was great. It was a lot better last week. As Dalton Wasserman said on the Monday show, we were actually talking about Anthony Richardson, but this actually goes with the Chicago Bears and Caleb Williams and Thomas Brown again. All right, great. Do it again, right? That's always what coaches say to players when things are going well, when they have a good day. It's like, hey, that was great. Do it again. And that's sort of where we're at with the Chicago Bears. It's a tough test to quote unquote do it again, but I want to see more of those things that allow Caleb to have some more confidence, because he felt like he had a lot more confidence back there, the confidence to see those rushing lanes, the confidence to not just be anchored in between the two tackles and prove to everybody that he's this pocket passer. Dude, we know you can be a pocket passer, but also part of why you were drafted number 1 overall is to take off and run. It's that athletic ability, and he's finding that balance. It's tough to find that balance against the Flores defense. There's no doubt about it. We will see what happens. He was pretty good against the blitz last week. He was 8 for 10, 87 yards, 8 completions, gaining a first down against the blitz last week, but we'll see if he can do that against a Flores blitz, because that is different. On the other side of things, I'm going to talk about my plus factor here, and that is really the Vikings run game in the red zone. It's not like necessarily like a plus factor for a player. It's more of the Vikings rush game in the red zone. I think it was last week, maybe it was the week before. I was talking about Sam Darnold, and I was like, hey, things are going well. They're winning football games, but Darnold's turning the ball over more than any other quarterback in the NFL, specifically in the red zone and when throwing in the red zone. That's not good. There's also a stat that I got the idea from Ian Hartitz, who tweeted it out, and it was an Aaron Jones stat, and I went and I just looked at the Vikings overall. Carmen, the Vikings run game within the 5-yard line this year, so 5 yards to the goal line, 5 yards to the end zone, they're 25th in the NFL in rushing grade. They're 31st in the NFL at EPA per rush, and they have 11 carries for -4 yards.
Oof.
That's not, when you get within the 5-yard line,
right?
Your run game's got to be a lot more reliable than that.
At the very least, don't go backwards.
So when you combine not being able to run the football within the 5-yard line and turning the ball over when you get into the red zone in the pass game, this is, again, more of a take a step back and go, okay, when we predict how far the Vikings could go this season, if they don't fix those two things, you get up against some teams that are really good in the playoffs and you got to go on a run here. That's got to be a lot better than what it has been 11 weeks into the season. So that's my plus factor there. Vikings run game once we get into those goal-and-goal situations within the 5.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have it on the other side of things too. Well, actually, both sides. So it goes along with yours. It's just the Bears in the red zone, whether that's on offense or defense. Because defensively, and for everything that you just talked about and how much Minnesota has struggled inside the red zone, Bears defense is the best red zone defense in the league. They are only allowing a touchdown on 40.63% of red zone trips. Like they are shut down within the 20. But then on the offensive side of the ball, you have a little bit of room for improvement, although they are still top 10 in red zone offense at 60.87%. It's just been a matter of getting into the red zone. I really do think that it's going to come down to which team can capitalize inside the 20, and especially in those goal to go situations. Um, and then that's going to determine who essentially wins this game. But if the Bears can hold up their end of the bargain like they have been on defense, that should bode well for them then. And then to be able to punch it in and just get to a red zone, get to the red zone on offense, then you're pretty good as far as the Bears offense goes as well. So I'm just interested to see how that kind of materializes again when you're talking about doing it again with Thomas Brown, and now that he's figured out not only Caleb but how to use those running backs and when to use those running backs, and maybe using Roschon Johnson with a lead blocker of an offensive lineman rather than handing the ball off to the offensive lineman at the goal line. I don't know. I honestly, that happened when it happened against the Packers. I was like, I kind of just chuckled to myself in the press box. I was like, oh, was that like a little dig? Was that like a little bit like a
Yeah, it might have been. It honestly might have been.
Like we're just like this we're gonna do things right now. This was like an indication of we're gonna run this play and we're gonna run it right. Even though it hasn't been before. I don't know. It was my petty little heart just kind of fluttered a little bit.
Coaches, they're a lot more petty than we think, honestly.
Yes.
Tennessee Titans at the Houston Texans. The next game I want to get to here in the 1 p.m. slate. I'll just let you take the wheel. You start the conversation here. How you want to start it? What's the matchup that matters here for this one?
Yeah, I'm going into the Texans O-line against the Titans D-line because I do still think that that's somewhat of a strength for the Tennessee Titans defensively. Jeffrey Simmons leads the way, 29 pressures. But
right.
The biggest thing with the Texans O-line is that they've got a 65.4 PFF grade overall, which is 27th in the league. Mm-hmm. They've got the 27th ranked run blocking grade. They're 15th pass blocking. And this is the reason it matters most, too, is that CJ Stroud, this year, his passing grade goes down to 61 when he's under pressure, which is not the worst at all. It ranks 7th among qualified quarterbacks, in fact, with a minimum of 100 dropbacks. But he's been sacked the second most of any quarterback in the league this year. And he hasn't had a passer rating of over 100 since October 13th, which was week 6. So you do see kind of this, and again, Nico Collins was out from a lot of that, and now he's back in the lineup, and you're seeing what that does for CJ Stroud, and you're hoping that they can kind of get back to being what we got used to at the tail end of last year. But I feel like the Texans and the Texans offense in particular just kind of shot itself in the foot last year by doing as well as it did and making the playoffs and all that other stuff, because now this is the standard that they're held to. When in reality, CJ Stroud is still a second-year quarterback. There's still going to be some bumps in the road.
Right.
And we're not giving them a lot of grace because we're like, well, we saw it last year.
We never
Why
do.
Can't you just do it again?
We never do.
We never do, right? So I really do think, though, that the offensive line is key here to helping Stroud be the best that he can be, along with Nico Collins being able to get the ball to him and get back to kind of that efficiency that we got used to seeing out of CJ Stroud last year. Because again, like I said, no passer rating over 100 since week 6. That's 6 weeks ago.
I would not have thought that would have been the case. My matchup that matters, I'll go on the other side of things. I'm going to talk about Calvin Ridley versus Derek Stingley Jr.
Yeah,
Stingley Jr. stats, as a whole this year, not super impressive. I mean, it's still a coverage grade in the 70s, but last week it was a coverage grade above 80. I thought he handled CeeDee Lamb very, very well. He is somebody who, he got himself an interception. He's got fantastic ball skills. If you miss a little bit with Derek Stingley there close, he could take the ball away from you or at least get his hands on it. That's what he's been fantastic at throughout his NFL career, especially when he was, and I should say on top of what he was when he was at LSU. So when you look at that and when you look at the type of coverage player that he is, if he could shut down Calvin Ridley, there's not a lot else that they go to. All due respect to Nick Westbrook-Akine, who had a big play last week. you look at Calvin Ridley and the rest of this receiver room. I mean, Tony Pollard's got a threat percentage this year of over 20%. He is the next most targeted player per route that he has run after Calvin Ridley. It's your running back. Tony Pollard's a great receiver out of the backfield. You should get him the football, but he shouldn't be number two in terms of threat percentage on your team. The guy who's number 3 is DeAndre Hopkins. He's not even there anymore. So all of a sudden, this becomes, damn, I like the way that Will Levis has played over the last couple of weeks. He's been, I think, a little bit more controlled, more confident. He's still got some big-time throws, but he's really limiting the turnover-worthy plays. He's not listening to that devil on his shoulder as much when he's, having that inner monologue when he drops back. But it's going to be really tough for them to move the ball through the air if Calvin Ridley can't get the better of Derek Stingley. And Stingley is just on a roll right now, especially watching how he played against one of the best in the NFL in CeeDee Lamb. So this one, the Texans aren't playing great. I don't think they're playing terrible, but it's not like they're just, no matter what, going to blow the Tennessee Titans out of the water. It's going to take a little bit for them to get up like that over multiple scores on the scoreboard. I don't know. I'm really worried about the Titans if they cannot get the ball going to Calvin Ridley, and it's just a really tough matchup this week to be able to do that with Derek Stingley. Plus factor in this one. What do you got?
Yeah, I have, going back to the Texans offense, it's explosives specifically from Nico Collins, Tank Dell. Catches gaining 15 or more yards. Nico Collins has 19 of them, despite the fact that he missed as much time as he did. Tank Dell, 10. Collins, 538 yards while lined up out wide, too, ranked 7th, which is just, again, wild, because he did miss significant time, and that was just indicative of the tear that he was on before he got hurt. So now, can he return to that? Can you get some explosives out of this offense and really get it going again? I think that is going to be, and you're going to have the opportunity to do so against this Tennessee defense. So that's where I'm looking just as a pure plus factor. If you want to get CJ Stroud going, if you want to get this offense looking like it did, you're going to need some explosive plays. And you have a guy that is really capable of that, especially with CJ Stroud. They have such a good rapport, him and Nico Collins. So that, backed up by Tank Dell, I would like to see more of that.
Another player that played really well last week is Danielle Hunter, the edge rusher for the Houston Texans. Him as my plus factor here going up against the offensive tackles for the Tennessee Titans. Nicholas Petit-Frere, Isaiah Prince both played last week. And I mean, when you look at what Hunter did last week, 7 pressures, 2 sacks, 16% pass rush win percentage. He had that insane, like crossover, rip to spin move that was just like one of the craziest pass rush reps I've ever seen. So Hunter very clearly in his bag. He's feeling himself this year. He's feeling like he's on a roll. He's got a pretty juicy matchup against the Titans offensive tackles. And so that could go south very poorly, or very quickly, I should say. It could be a game record type of a situation with Danielle Hunter against those offensive tackles. So they got to play better than that against the guy who's playing really well in Houston. Lions at Colts, the next game that I want to get to here. Matchup that matters. What do we got? This one's in Indianapolis. So I don't know. I mean, Colts, they've played some teams very tough throughout the course of this season. Obviously, they get Richardson back. They got a win last week, comeback win. Comeback drive, comeback fourth quarter from Anthony Richardson. You feel like they got a shot here against Detroit, or what's your matchup that matters?
Yeah, I don't know that I can really give anybody a shot at Detroit, and that's not a knock on Indianapolis. That's just the tear that Detroit has been on. I mean, they are playing with their food at this point. They are not only just dominating. I'm trying to think of like the last time that I trusted a team this much to like just absolutely go out there and have their way with other teams. Ben Johnson is coming up with something every game that he decides he wants to focus in on, and it has either something to do with the opposition's weakness, or maybe it's even something that they do well and Ben wants to prove that they do it better. I don't even know. It's just he seemingly is having so much fun. This offense is having so much fun, and in the process, they're hanging 50 on people. So the strength of that, like, I don't even want to go there when it comes to the matchup that matters, because we know that this offense is going to be hard to slow down. But I want to look at what the Colts do really well. And again, that's their offensive line. They have one of the best offensive lines in football, one of the only offensive lines that can rival the Lions' offensive line. And they're going against a Detroit defensive line that now has the Darius Smith fully entrenched in it. Watching that game, his debut with Detroit, obviously he was a factor, but it's still kind of like he's not quite getting the Aiden Hutchinson treatment, or at least it doesn't look like it quite yet. He's factoring into the Lions are still blitzing. They're still doing a lot with that front. And that's a testament to Aleem McNeil too and DJ Reader. I keep talking about them, and I will talk about them till the cows come home, because they are so, so good at getting that interior push that you need from this defensive line if you aren't going to blitz. But that's going to be going against the strength of this Colts offensive line, which is they have a 79.9 PFF grade. That's fifth overall. Their pass blocking grade ranks fourth overall. So that's something that you know that Anthony Richardson is going to have time. And what can Anthony Richardson do with time? He can get the ball down the field, or at least you hope. That's the hope. And that's what you're going to need to do if you do have any shot against the Lions. But I can't, in good faith, say anybody has a shot against the Lions right now. I mean, I think they're by far and away the best team in the league.
Yeah, you talked about Anthony Richardson being able to get the ball deep down the field. It presents a very interesting matchup this week in particular, because he is going up against the best safety room in the NFL in Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. And I think that when people would look at this game, they'd say, all right, well, what's an area where you think that the Colts could maybe surprise them, get a couple of plays here? It is Anthony Richardson and that freakish arm strength, being able to attack deep down the field, whether it's Alec Pierce, whether it's A.D. Mitchell, whether it's Michael Pittman Jr., Josh Downs. Yeah, he's more of a yards after catch guy, but still incredibly productive for them. The issue is that they're running up against a buzzsaw in the safety group that has been fantastic. It's been a no-fly zone for them. They've been able to come downhill and really affect a run, and also those crossers, erasing those yards after catch opportunities. So to me, the matchup that matters really is Anthony Richardson versus these safeties, because if Richardson can get a couple of big time throws like what we saw last week and not put the ball in harm's way, well, maybe you have a shot at this team, but it's going to take a couple of those. This is sort of a game where I don't think Richardson is quite ready yet. But this is the type of game of like why you would draft an Anthony Richardson, to say, okay, fire the ball 30 to 40 yards down the field on a frozen rope before the safeties can even get there, and you can get it in your guys' hands. Like, that's the type of arm talent and the reason why you draft a player like that. I don't know if he's quite seeing the field, or should I say anticipating the field the way that he needs to really complete those passes. But if we get a step in the right direction type of a game, a look into the future type of a game of what Richardson might be able to be consistently, especially coming off last week when he played well. I mean, he had an elite PFF passing grade in the fourth quarter last week, 8 for 10 passing, over 120 yards passing. He had that big time throw in the fourth quarter on that final drive alone to win the game. 3 for 3 passing, another elite passing grade, 60 yards passing on that one. So this dude was ready last week, and he had some really impressive throws. Can you do it against the Lions defense? I don't know about that, but it is at home. So hopefully you have a little bit of that home field advantage to you. And then when it comes to my plus factor in this one, I'm looking at the Colts cornerback room. Jalen Jones, their outside corner, has played well at times this season, but he has just as many games where he is graded at an 80 or above in coverage as he has games where he is graded below 50. He's got 4 games above 80. He's got 4 games where he's graded below 50. So it has truly been a hot and cold, up and down season for Jalen Jones. You've got to get one of those weeks where it's above 80, because you've got Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams and all those tight ends and everybody, anything that Ben Johnson can think of to throw at you, he's going to throw at you. So if Jalen Johnson's not on his A game, I don't know if the Colts have a chance in this one. It would take a superhuman Josh Allen-esque type of a performance from Anthony Richardson if the Colts corners aren't playing well, because the Lions can really light up that scoreboard. So Jalen Jones has to be my plus factor for that reason. Who is your plus factor in this game?
Yeah, it's Jonathan Taylor, because again, I'm going back towards what can the Colts potentially do and to have a shot in this, right? And if you look at the Colts offense this season, plays gaining 10 or more yards, they have 43 rushes that gain 10 or more yards, which is ranked 5th in the league. And that's something that you can do to kind of also give Anthony Richardson something to lean on, because he does have the 3rd highest turnover worthy play percentage of any quarterback. So if you can keep the ball on the ground a little bit more and really rely on Jonathan Taylor, I think that does give you at least the opportunity to sustain some drives and then pick your spots if you're Anthony Richardson to go down the field and try to stress this Detroit secondary, which I do think that there's a little bit of an opportunity to the outside. Maybe to just keep it away from Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch because we know how lethal that combination is. But I mean, the Lions defense this season, they are fifth in EPA per play against. They have allowed the fifth fewest rushing yards. So while it has to be Jonathan Taylor, it's going to be hard to be Jonathan Taylor to really get him going. They have 69 missed tackles, which is real nice because it's the sixth fewest in the league. And I can't resist anytime. I can't. Sorry, guys. I can't. It is. They don't miss tackles. They're tackling really, they're very fundamentally sound. Aaron Glenn has that unit ready to go, whether that's on the ground or through the air. But if you can stress them or try to stress them and stay as multiple as possible, if you're this Colts offense, I think that is your best bet.
So basically the Colts have to play a perfect football game. And even then, it's amazing. And even then, it's a maybe.
And even then, it's a maybe.
I think that
but
it just...
Again, that's not a knock on the Colts. That's just...
No, right. I was just about to say, that is just to encapsulate what the Detroit Lions are at this point. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not like playing favorites here. I want to see this team in the Super Bowl. I would love to see it. I think it'd be so much fun. I think they have also built this team the right way, and they are certainly putting themselves in position to get to that point to play for a Lombardi Trophy. Patriots Dolphins, next game I want to hit. This is a division matchup, a little AFC East divisional matchup here. Patriots are traveling to Miami for this one. Your matchup that matters. What do we got, Carmen?
It's how the Patriots corners fare against this Dolphins passing game. Tyreek Hill, slowly but surely, now that Tua is back, you're starting to see he's coming along.
Yep.
Jalen Waddle, same thing. Patriots corners, though, I mean, they're kind of middle of the pack, which I don't think they get enough credit for necessarily. 64.2 PFF grade overall, that's ranks 17th. Their coverage grade, 65.2, that ranks 15th. So they're doing fine. And it's how they're going to now contend with these deep threats or this multiple passing attack now that you have the full breadth of Miami's offense available to you. If you're Mike McDaniel, how does that end up materializing against what should be one of the strengths of the Patriots? And in a division game, too, where anything can happen.
I talked about Will Levis when we were talking about the Tennessee Titans game, no longer listening to the devil who's on his shoulder. I think that Drake May is, certainly a year younger. And I think that is a crucial part of this game is May. We have seen him at the big time throws, but his turnover worthy play percentage is actually higher than it is his big time throw percentage, but when you look at, it's not all bad. I mean, like there's some stats that you love that you love that you're seeing already from him in his first couple starts on intermediate throws, which is 10 to 19 yards. He's 19 for 34. He's got 320 yards this season. He has 2 touchdowns, also has 3 interceptions on throws of 20 or more yards. 5 for 18. This is where he really starts to struggle. 155 yards, 2 touchdowns, those 2 interceptions. I love the fact that he is sort of opening it up and allowing himself to really feel like he can attack all levels of the field. But if you have as many turnover-worthy plays as you do big-time throws, it's hard for me to think that you're going to best the Dolphins in this matchup, even though I guess I would tell you, hey, you got to open it up a little bit, especially with the Dolphins at home. You figure with Tua back in the lineup, now they've got a couple of games under their belt. This could be their most explosive offensive output yet. And maybe the script lends itself to where, hey, May's got to open it up a lot more. If it's a turnover-worthy play, it is what it is. But we got to push the ball deep down the field and score. So perhaps that's just the nature of where the script of this game is going to go. But I think early on, first quarter, second quarter, if we can get a couple of big-time throws from Drake May, if we can get some of those big-time scrambles that we have seen, that's not an official, big-time scrambles, not an official PFF stat, but maybe it should be, now that we're seeing a lot more mobile quarterbacks play really well at the NFL level at the top of the list. But, I think that if he could start out hot and he could put some pressure on the Miami Dolphins, maybe that's their recipe to win. So limit the turnover-worthy plays to start because, man, if you have a couple of turnover-worthy plays to start the game, I think it might be a little bit of an avalanche for them. But who you got as a plus factor in this game? Yeah,
honestly, that was mine too, was just to make sure that Drake May takes care of the ball on those intermediate to deep passes because on short passes, man's got 5 touchdowns and just 1 interception. And you can see how they're getting him into a rhythm a little bit. He's using his legs a lot more. I think a lot of people fell into the trap of, when he was drafted, like he's this pocket passer. That's not who Drake May is. He's not a pocket passer. He absolutely likes to throw on the run. He can evade pressure, which he's going to need again with this Patriots offensive line, which, you talk about the strength of this team. That's not it. But Drake May has been able to get himself out of trouble and has been able to develop, especially over these last few weeks, despite the fact that he cannot trust the protection in front of him. So much so that when the Patriots do get into the red zone, Drake May is 15 of 25 for 86 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. So in these shorter passing situations, he's been really good. Is that enough to build his confidence up to now start opening it up while limiting those turnover-worthy plays too? That's kind of the next step that you want to see out of Drake May. And is he going to be able to do that against the Dolphins, against a division opponent? We'll see. But that, to me, is a huge plus factor if the Patriots are going to have a shot.
My plus factor in this one is Jalen Ramsey, and I think it's more of just I don't think anybody's talking about Jalen Ramsey having a really good season, which sounds weird, right? I mean, it feels like anytime that Jalen Ramsey has been having a fantastic season previously, whether it was in Jacksonville, whether it was with the Rams, obviously it's big news. Oh, Jalen Ramsey is having a phenomenal year. He's at the top of the list, whatever. Jalen Ramsey's third in the NFL right now in coverage grade for cornerbacks. He's only allowed 26 catches, 234 receiving yards all season long, 11 weeks into the year. And so he's playing very, very well. Again, it's the quietest, successful Jalen Ramsey season that I can remember. And I just feel as though this is maybe less of a plus factor for this matchup specifically. Although, of course, if you start to really shut down Drake May's favorite option, then the pickings are slim, if you will. But it's just more of a nod to how well Jalen Ramsey is playing this year. And I don't feel like he's getting enough credit for it because a lot of the talk in Miami has been about the quarterback situation, the lack of explosive plays on offense. And defense, it was okay, what's going on with their defensive line and everything. Jalen Ramsey's just out there having a hell of a year, and I don't think that he's getting the credit that he deserves for it. So to me, it's more of just a hat tip to the season that Jalen Ramsey is having.
Jalen Ramsey and quiet isn't something that usually.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. I'm over here having to talk for Jalen Ramsey. Normally, it doesn't require that, but I'll gladly give him his kudos here for a really good season. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are traveling to New York to face the New York Giants. And Tommy Cutlets, as Tommy DeVito is now starting for the New York Giants. They've benched Daniel Jones, not going with Drew Lock. I saw there were some tweets of reporters, talking to Drew Lock about all this. So I haven't exactly seen all the quotes about it. Somebody was sort of explaining that the reason why you go to Tommy DeVito is because that Drew Lock's not going to be back next year. You're wondering if Tommy DeVito can be the backup that you want for whoever's coming up. I suppose I could believe that. You're tanking. You're trying to get the best draft pick. That's what you're actually trying to do here, and we'll see if they can do it.
But can Tommy DeVito be trusted to tank?
That's what I'm saying. I was just about to say Tommy ain't going out like that.
No, he's gonna go down swinging.
He's absolutely gonna go
swings hit.
So okay, tell me what's the matchup that matters here in this game?
Again, I'm going to go to what the strength of this Giants team is, which is that defensive line led by Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, how that's going to fare against a Buccaneers offensive line that I think is still missing Tristan Wirfs, or barring any sort of miracle, will be missing Tristan Wirfs, who is just, it's a tremendous loss. And I was my heart just went 2 weeks ago, and I was just oh no. But leaders and pressures for the Giants, Brian Burns, 39, Dexter Lawrence, 36. This Bucs O-line has been doing really well this season. 76 pressures allowed in pass protection. That's tied for the 5th fewest. They have the 3rd best pass blocking grade at 79.2. Run blocking grade is a little bit different of a story. So how good not only is this Giants defensive line at bringing pressure, but stopping the run as well. Is that going to impede what the Bucs are doing as far as trying to get the ground game going? And then we'll see if Mike Evans is back, maybe. We'll see. It should be trending in that direction. So does that kind of open up this Bucs offense? You don't need to rely on the run game as much as you did before. But I do think that this is just kind of a trench battle between this offensive line that is going to be down its best player and the Giants defensive line.
Yeah, a lot of injury stuff here with the Buccaneers. I just looked up this to see if anything had come up over the last couple of hours. And Todd Bowles was up speaking. This is from Pewter Report. They said that Todd Bowles said that Tristan Wirfs and Zion McCollum probably going to be game time decisions in this one.
God, he's insane. Tristan is insane.
He would be, for him to play, it would be pretty crazy. I would be shocked if he played, but
right. But like, I'm also not going to rule it out though.
Said it's game time decision. Jamel Dean is back and healthy, so that's important sort of to my matchup that matters, which I'll get to in a second. It looks like Mike Evans might be coming back as well, so I think that that's obviously something that you got to think about here.
Was after the bye weeks, though.
Giants' big play offense, I think, is going to be important for this one because the Bucs, specifically over the last month, but really just the season at large, 42 plays of 20 or more yards this season. That is sixth most in the NFL. So, with Zion McCollum being hurt and Jamel Dean being hurt, obviously that goes into that. Giants offense this season, 19 completions of 20 or more yards, which is last in the NFL. And then 34 rushes gaining 10 or more yards. That's tied for 16th. So the Giants offense is not an explosive offense, but they're going against the team that's sort of given up those explosive plays at certain points this year. So is this a recipe for Tommy DeVito to come in, guns blazing, first start this season, and really just kind of take it to a Bucs defense that's been vulnerable with a lot of those explosive plays? I think that is something to watch out for because they haven't been good at it lately. Is this a matchup that they actually find favor in that regard? The plus factor in this one, Carmen, you ready for it? Give Bucky Irving the damn ball.
I love that. I love that.
This is my plus factor in this one. Bucky Irving has been the best Bucs running back so far this season, and they still have this sort of really two-headed rushing attack between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. I'm not saying that Rachaad White does not deserve to be on the field. He does. I think he's a good change of pace back, and he gives you a lot of value as a receiver as well. So you want to get him into the game plan. But in my opinion, Bucky Irving should have more pieces to the pie when it comes to the running back shares and how much he is getting involved here. The Giants are 20th when it comes to run defense as a team. So this is a ripe matchup for the Bucs to be able to move the ball pretty well on the ground, which they have for a good portion of this season. I'm calling it. Bucky Irving, first 100-yard game of his career. It's happening this weekend. I'm calling it. There we go.
I would love it. He's such a like fan. I don't know if you call it a cult favorite, but a fan favorite.
Oh yeah. Well, look, there is a Drake lyric that goes, "My city loved me like a college running back," and you can broaden that to NFL as well. Nobody is more beloved on a team than a running back that hasn't proven that they're bad yet. They think that they are. Every fan base thinks their running back is Barry Sanders until they're bad, and then
until proven otherwise. Okay, right. They're good until proven bad. Yes. That's what that is. But no, I mean, even within the building, not necessarily even on the coaching side, but like on the staff side, because I still talk to a ton of people over there. Everybody's in love with Bucky. He plays ball when it comes to all the social media stuff. He's so much fun. He's such a nice, kind, wonderful, adorable human. So he has like this cult following even in the building where everyone just wants the best and like nothing bad to ever happen to Bucky Irving. And I am fully on board with this. So I really appreciate that. I'm going to go to the other side because I'm just going to, I mean, we talked a little bit about it. Tommy Cutlets being kind of the X factor for the Giants here, and really to make sure that the Bucs shut down Tommy Cutlets. Now, under Todd Bowles, they haven't necessarily been the ones that, make running like young or rookie quarterbacks look good. Like they've kind of shut down that narrative, but just keep it close, keep the lid on. Like don't bring it back up. I don't want to see it again. Don't make Tommy look otherworldly or that he could be the actual like starting quarterback of the New York Giants, as much as that pains me as a fellow Italian to say. But here's the thing is that you got Malik Neighbors. Can you get the ball to Malik Neighbors if you are Tommy DeVito? Because Malik Neighbors has 12 contested catches this year. That's 6. So you just have to literally say, F it. Malik's down there somewhere. Mm-hmm. Just do that. 13 catches gaining 15 or more yards. That's tied for 24th among receivers. 17 catches gaining a first down on third and fourth down, which leads the league. So this is a guy that can be really clutch for you. You just have to get him the ball. So focus on that. So the plus factor is Tommy DeVito, but it's Tommy DeVito getting the ball to Malik Neighbors.
Mid-show stat here from Dave Salfaro once again. Neighbors needs 4 catches to break the NFL record for most catches in the first 9 games of an NFL career. Puka Nacua had 64. Saquon
it's all
Barkley
on your shoulders,
had 61.
Tommy.
He's
it's all
right
on
there.
Your shoulders.
He's right there. Double digit targets.
I can do these things. I've got
You can. I wasn't going to tell you you couldn't do it.
I can do this.
That's too good. That's too good.
Allowed.
All right. Before we get to the next game, I'm not wearing one right now, but my favorite hats are the melon hats that we have had over at PFF. You know, sometimes you put on a hat and you just go, okay, I mean, I'm going to get like 2 uses out of this thing and that's going to be it. Well, not with these. The second that you put one in your hands, and specifically the second that you put it on your head, you know that it's going to be your favorite hat. It certainly has been for me. I've got one that I work out in all the time. So going for a run, if it's in the rain, you know, if it's getting sweaty, it's not going to, you know, bend all over the place. It's not going to lose its shape, and it's not going to smell bad either. So these are great hats. They're made for these workouts, but they've got a lot of different styles too. They've got some hats where, okay, you can put one on if you don't feel like doing your hair and you're going out to hang out with your friends or something like that, or maybe it's after work, whatever. They got you. These are the best hats, most durable hats that you're going to find, and they've got one for every season as well. We're coming into winter, so they've got a thermal collection as well where you can see the hats that are going to help you stay warm. But man, these are, I cannot say enough about these hats. Even with them sponsoring the show, they are fantastic, and I love them. Great comfort and fit. They've got the sizing for all different types of head shapes and everything like that. They're going to feel good. They're going to look good. Go check them out for yourself. Melon, MELIN.com. You can put these hats to the test yourself. They're the most durable hat, but they're also fantastic. They're comfortable. They keep their shape, and they're going to continue to look just like you took them out of the box long after you do. So check them out, MELIN.com, and get you some of the best hats today.
I want that beanie. The beanie with a little pom-pom on top. That's so cute.
I don't have that.
I didn't know they had beanies too.
They do have beanies. They got a lot of stuff. We got to get you hooked up.
Yeah, seriously.
Here. They're the best. Cowboys Commanders, divisional matchup here. Wonder if Deion Sanders is going to be watching this one for any reason at all whatsoever. What do you have as the matchup that matters here for this one, Carmen?
I can't think of why.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe some scouts.
Sure, Sanders is going to the East-West Shrine game, which is held in Frisco, Texas this year. That's probably unrelated news. Probably.
No, totally unrelated news.
Totally unrelated news. Anyway. Dallas is awful rushing defense against what is actually they're rushing offense. It's bad both ways. But
it is bad both ways. Yeah,
it's bad both ways.
Honestly, you didn't have to correct yourself because I think I'm going on the other side of things. But go on.
Okay, all right.
We'll cover our bases either way.
I was gonna say I'm going their rushing offense because Washington, their run defense is struggling right now as well.
Yeah.
So I'm going on that side of things. You're right. I could have just flipped that, and it still would have been a matchup that matters. It's the run game across the board, but Cowboys rushing offense ranks 31st, 817 rushing yards this year, 18 rushes gaining 10 or more yards, which is 4th fewest.
Yeah.
Commanders rushing defense, 1,655 rushing yards allowed. Oh, but this is So that's the most of any team. And then 48 rushes allowing 10 or more yards, tied for the most. So the Commanders they are oozing yards on the ground. And the Cowboys, up until this point, haven't been able to take advantage of that, even going against other teams that have let up some yards on the ground. Rico Dowdle looks a lot better than you probably thought he was going to coming into this season for the Cowboys. The Cowboys are masters at just saying things and like declaring things that pretty much everybody already knew. Like a couple weeks ago, I think it was Jerry Jones or Mike McCarthy that came out and just said, "Yeah, Rico Dowdle's our lead back." We're like, "Yeah, of course he is." It's not the ghost of me.
But then that was the graphic, you know, like that was the graphic that they
it was like he's our dude, and like making something out of nothing.
We know actually.
The Cowboys are just absolute masters at making something out of nothing, or making nothing out of something too. There's that as well, but on this side, I'm going, all right, they cannot run the ball. You have Cooper Rush, who has been not great I think coming into this, when you said you were going to go to Cooper Rush after Dak's injury, you said, well, we were 5-1 with Cooper Rush as a starter before. That is no longer the case.
Sure.
And so you want to be able to lean as much on the run game as you possibly can if you're Dallas. And again, going against a team that has been giving up yards on the ground.
I'll flip to the other side of things. I'm going to go with the Commanders' offensive line, specifically against the Cowboys' defensive line. You could throw into, I'll get into my plus factor in a second, which has to do with the Commanders' run game and the Cowboys' run defense. But specifically, I was really impressed by the Washington Commanders' offensive line through the early parts of the season. They were one of the top 10 offensive lines in the NFL, I think, through the first 8 weeks. And since then, over the last month, 3 out of the 4 lowest graded games that they have had as a unit have come over the last month. And so they're on a bit of a low streak here. The Cowboys defensive line, sort of a nice get right game situation, which is wild to say with Micah Parsons. Obviously, Mike is going to play really well because he's back from injury and he's going to stay motivated, because I think that's the type of player that the Micah Parsons is. So not saying that part of it's going to be easy, but the rest of it, can you really command the ground game specifically, which brings me into my plus factor, which is Brian Robinson Jr. Last week, 13 carries, 63 yards. Brian Robinson Jr. hasn't been like this 100-yard game, like stacking up multiple 100-yard games in a row or anything like that. But his presence and his efficiency has been a big reason why the run game for Washington has been as successful as it was during the first half of the season. So tying these a little bit together here with my matchup that matters in my plus factor, I'd like to see Brian Robinson Jr. have a yards per carry average above 4 once again, maybe even above 5. That's when this offense was really operating very well. We talk about Jaden Daniels. His role in all this is obviously very important, but how they have been able to complement him with a very good and efficient run game, certainly through the first half of the season, was something that I feel like has been missing over the last couple of weeks. So can the offensive line really handle things against a bad run defense team in the Dallas Cowboys? And can Brian Robinson Jr. get back to his efficient ways, maybe even climb closer to that 100-yard game mark yet again? What's the plus factor here for you?
This is kind of more of the overarching thing as we're going forward here with the Dallas Cowboys, captained by Cooper Rush, although I guess Trey Lance is maybe going to sneak in there for some packages and stuff like that. But I mean, Trey Lance did not look good in training camp, so I think that this is still Cooper Rush's job for the most part. But can he get the ball to CeeDee Lamb? The fact that CeeDee Lamb is on pace for career lows in catch percentage, yards per reception, success rate. He has the 3rd most contested catches of any wide receiver with a minimum of 25 targets and 16 explosives, and he's been able to do that with a middling offense. But the fact that he's really the only guy that is featured on that offense and he's still on pace for these career lows, it just doesn't sit well with him, especially, I have to think that with Cooper Rush, that has to be priority number 1, is trying to get the ball to CeeDee Lamb while not throwing, into bad situations, taking care of the football, all that kind of stuff. So CeeDee Lamb going against Benjamin St-Juste in this game, theoretically, how is that going to work? Is Cooper Rush going to be able to get the ball to him? We know that CeeDee Lamb can go up and get those contested catches, but St-Juste is going to try to make that as hard as possible. 8 forced incompletions by St-Juste, 40 catches allowed for 507 yards this season so far. He's been targeted 62 times, or his receivers that he's been covering have been targeted 62 times. He's played a total of 337 snaps. So overall, he's the workhorse of that secondary in Washington, especially now, like Marshawn Lattimore is not healthy yet. And you're probably eyeing after the bye for him to return, or to return to play. They don't want to rush him. And especially when you have these games that are very winnable, it's going to be it's going to fall on St-Juste to try and stop CeeDee Lamb, or if he even gets the ball, which I think it boils down to Cooper Rush, if he can get him there. I don't know. I'm not super in on the Dallas Cowboys right now, if you couldn't tell, because I don't think anybody is.
Yeah, not a lot of people are. Broncos at Raiders is the next matchup I want to talk about here. Nice little AFC West showdown. Broncos feel like a surprise team certainly this season. Not that people didn't think that they weren't maybe going in the right direction, but it feels like they are ahead of schedule. It feels like both them and the Los Angeles Chargers are ahead of schedule here, and those look like two teams that not a lot of people expected to make the playoffs. I feel like maybe the Chargers, if you had a lot of faith in Jim Harbaugh, but certainly with those two teams in playoff position now, it's exciting to watch. And now these games are we've got to really pay attention to this one, certainly on the Broncos side of things for this playoff picture in the AFC. What's your matchup that matters here in this one?
Yeah, the Raiders are kind of getting left behind in the AFC West, which I think that we thought that it was going to be kind of crowded at the bottom, and that's not the case at this point. I'm looking at the Raiders' run game in particular because, do you know, Trev, there were 9 different players last week that recorded a rush against the Dolphins. Do you know how many rushing yards Las Vegas ended up with at the end of that game?
Oh, it's probably very low, isn't it?
60 rushing yards despite 9 different players recording a rush.
That's bad.
Gardner Minshew attempted 43 passes.
9?
That's
9 players?
9. I know. I thought I was looking at the receiving stats at first, Trev. Like when I was like looking at through the box score, looking at like the different stats from that game, I was like, are we sure? No, we're sure. Okay. I mean, like some guys, like it was just like one gadget play or like one jet sweep or something, some type of end around coming out of the backfield. But still, you had 9 different players touch the ball on the ground, and yet you couldn't get anything going on the ground. And Gardner Minshew, it was up to him to throw the ball 43 times, which is not a recipe for success if you're Las Vegas right now. You're also going against Denver, which has a top 5 rushing defense, 4th best EPA per play defensively against the run, 2nd best overall EPA per play allowed on defense, period. They have the 4th best overall grade. So this is a very, very tough defensive unit. We've talked about it over and over and over again, and it still deserves more talking about as far as what this Denver defense is under Vance Joseph and how much they've really bought in to what he's doing there. Vegas needs to get multiple and needs to do as much as they possibly can to stress this defense because what they did last week against Miami just ain't gonna cut it.
I just still can't get over the Raiders.
I know.
So Broncos offensive line, I think is playing like one of the best in the NFL. I really do. Over the last month, they are number 1 in the league in total pass blocking grade as a unit. I also think they run the ball very, very well, certainly out of zone blocking scheme sets. They're not great when it comes to man and gap scheme blocks, duo, middle of the tackles, all that kinds of stuff. But it's not like they're terrible in that area either. Raiders are 29th in the NFL in total pressures that they have produced. So the Broncos offensive line and the Raiders defensive line has to be the matchup that matters for me. Bo Nix, when kept clean this season, he has a very high completion percentage. He has almost 2,000 yards passing. He's got 12 touchdowns, which is a top 10 mark when kept clean. Only 4 interceptions, 99 completions, gaining a first down that's 8th most in the league, and then an 84.4 passing grade, which is 12th highest in the NFL. So simply put, when Bo Nix is kept clean, this is a very good offense. He keeps them on time. He is accurate. He knows where the ball needs to go. And often it goes to the hands of Courtland Sutton, who's been pretty fantastic, especially again over the last month. And as Bo Nix has really kind of caught fire here. So as long as that Broncos offensive line keeps him clean, Broncos offense can keep moving as intended. And I don't think the Raiders are going to be a defensive line that's going to get in the way of that this week. But if they're going to beat the Denver Broncos, it's probably going to be the recipe that they need to have. So we'll see. Not a great matchup for them to be able to do so, but that's sort of how I see it. What's your plus factor here?
Yeah. After all that I just made too, it was 7 players, not 9.
Oh, it was 7, not 9. 7's still a lot.
I was going to say, it's not like none of the sentiments change. 7 guys rushing the ball, and you only end up with 60 rushing yards. That's absolutely, it's still insane.
Especially because Brock Bowers was one of them. I just pulled it up myself. Yeah,
I adore Brock Bowers. First of all, because apparently there's nothing this man can't do, and there's nothing the Raiders offense won't ask him to do.
Yeah.
But I guess, hey, when he's your best player, you do that. I don't know. I must have written down 9, even though I counted 7. I don't know, whatever. It was early this morning when I was doing all my prep on the plane. It was like 6:30 in the morning. Anyway, still point remains. get the ground game going. I had the same plus factor as you, which was, or maybe it was your matchup that matters about the Broncos offensive line, just given the fact that they have really allowed for this development that we're seeing from Bo Nix. I mean, like, that's the most important part here, is that they are a really, really good unit. And again, it was a unit that we had question marks about coming into this season, and you were wondering if this was going to hold up, if they were going to, I mean, you knew that Sean Payton was capable of calling one of these, kind of short passing offenses, quick game, all that kind of stuff. Was that going to, work with all of the question marks you had there? But now you realize, no, you can rely on this unit. You can rely on the Broncos offensive line. And it's, Nix's passing stats, while kept clean, are great. So that's the biggest part here, is just keep him clean. And to your point, I don't know who is really going to get in the way of that, with the way that this Raiders defensive line is.
I mean, Crosby, but we talk about Crosby every week,
and I keep expecting him to be more of a game wrecker than he has been this season.
It's hard when you just get to key on him. You get to chip him, you get to keep tight ends on that side, you can shift protections. Like, it's hard even for a player like Crosby. So
he can't do it on his own, and that he really is pretty much trying to do it on his own, and not just on that defensive line, but you go through every level of the defense there, and it's like pretty much everything is hinging on Max Crosby being effective, and that's just, when you can key in on him like that, it's a fool's errand.
Broncos run game is sort of my plus factor here for this one. You got Julian McLaughlin, you got Javonte Williams, who's playing better now in the second half of the season. Audric Estime is now getting in the lineup as well. It's a three-headed rushing attack, and I feel like as long as those guys have healthy yards per carry averages, which a couple of them, two of them, McLaughlin and Javonte Williams certainly did last week, and we've seen what Estime can do. It was just a low volume kind of a thing for him. I think it's tough when you only get 4 or 5 carries a game to be super efficient, but they're very comfortable with all those guys. And so it just feels like, man, we talked about the Broncos offensive line. We talked about Bo Nix. Courtland Sutton's been fantastic. Man, I was having this conversation with people in the office. I remember last year when, was it last year? When did they trade Jerry Jeudy? When was this? Was this like this year? Has it been that long of a year? Anyways. Remember when they had Jerry Jeudy and Courtland Sutton, and it was sort of like, okay, both of these guys are on the trade block. At least that's sort of what we heard. That was the reports. They will trade one or the other, and they're going to kind of.
This is his first year, by the way, in Cleveland.
Right, but okay, so then they traded him before they. Okay, anyways,
yes, they traded him before.
So, can you imagine if they would have traded Courtland Sutton instead of Jerry Jeudy? They'd have nothing. All due respect to Jerry Jeudy. Like, Jerry Jeudy would not be doing what Courtland Sutton did. Courtland Sutton has been a monster for that passing attack, and it's basically been him and no other consistency. I don't think Jerry Jeudy would have that same success with that sort of volume. Like, Courtland Sutton was basically the only one out of the two who was going to be able to do it. And I try to think of, like, what if they would have traded Courtland Sutton? This team would not have been good. So that was, anyways, Broncos run game, the pass game, the offensive line, it's all kind of gelling together, and I think that they're playing fantastic. Niners, Packers. Yeah, Green Bay. Obviously, we get to talk a little bit more about Green Bay, like we talked about at the very top of the show. What's your matchup that matters here? This is a historic, classic matchup between two of the oldest teams in the NFL, Packers and the Niners.
With two very good friends at head coach for either one of these teams.
You're right. So, Matt LaFleur and Kyle Shanahan.
Yes, they are very, very good friends. And Matt LaFleur took a lot from Matt LaFleur basically does the same thing that Kyle Shanahan does in a lot of ways, but he just does it with tight ends instead of running backs. The way that he uses multiple tight end sets and kind of builds his offense off of that. But what is so dangerous about the Green Bay Packers is you never know who's going to go off for them, because they have a lot of good to great options. They don't have like that one elite wide receiver that you can always key in on, or bank on him having a triple digit kind of game. But what they have is just a plethora of options. And this past game against the Bears, it was Christian Watson ends up going off for a career high 150 yards on 4 catches. I mean, he's being utilized in the correct way that I think that he should be for this offense. He is not a wide receiver one. He's not an X receiver. Or maybe he could be an X receiver, I should say. We get those terms confused when it comes to what these roles are in the offense. He's not a guy that's going to get your lion's share of the targets. That's more like Jaden Reed style, but he is the one that you are going to isolate on the outside, and he's going to take off, and he can win some of those one-on-one matchups. Or in the case of at the beginning, I believe, of the fourth quarter against that Bears game, Jordan Love hits Christian Watson 30 yards down the field, and then Christian Watson takes it another 30 yards. So that was a 60-yard completion. Didn't ultimately result in any points for the Green Bay Packers, weirdly enough. But all of these guys are capable of stuff like that. Jaden Reed has 16 catches of 15 or more yards. Romeo Doubs has 12. Christian Watson himself has 8. You have Tucker Kraft, the tight end, has 6 catches of 15 or more yards for this team. So you have guys like Dontavian Wicks. Josh Jacobs got more involved in the receiving game too against the Bears, which he had a season high in receiving yards with 58 this game, and had well over 100 all-purpose yards, and was utilized kind of as like this just really versatile piece that kept the Bears defense kind of guessing as to what he was going to do. So can you continue doing that? And how do San Francisco's corners contend with really not knowing who to be paying attention to? Because you can only account for so many guys. And what makes Green Bay's offense so dangerous is that they have more guys than you can account for. And that's on an every down basis. They can sub in certain guys. You can't let any of these guys get behind you. And that's been a detriment for most teams going against this Green Bay Packers team that now has Jordan Love back in the lineup. I expect him to have kind of a bounce back game, because he didn't really do that well against the Bears. I mean, they only scored 20 points at the end of the day. You're going to want more production when you're going against Kyle Shanahan's offense.
I'll flip to the other side. Same matchup, just on the other side of things. I'm going to go the Packers cornerbacks versus the Niners wide receivers. Obviously, we know that Brandon Ayuk is not in this lineup, but we've seen what Juwan Jennings can do. We've seen a little bit of what Ricky Pearsall can do. You throw in the tight ends, you throw in Christian McCaffrey. They're going to be going up against a Packers secondary that has struggled this season. 58.1 coverage grade as a team. That's 24th in the NFL. They're 25th in EPA per pass over the last month specifically. Jair Alexander is the only one with a coverage grade above 65 over the last month. And he left last week with a knee injury. So, man, I mean, if Jair is going to be limited at all whatsoever, it has not been good cornerback play from the Green Bay Packers. And yeah, I guess you could probably just... The safeties have obviously played well. Like Evan Williams to sort of start the season, and Xavier McKinney has played well. Javon Bullard has played well. I think that Edgerrin Cooper has played well at the linebacker level. I want to give him a shout out. But, you just look at just the Jeff Hafley switch overall. I mean, without those turnovers from Xavier McKinney, and I don't know if it's really fair to take those away, but the change and the transition from a group of players who were drafted to fit a certain defense on the defensive line, they're not really very productive. And my plus factor, to just take it right into it, is any defensive lineman not named Rashawn Gary, but even Rashawn Gary. Gary is at, I think almost career lows in pass rush win percentage and pass rush grade. But outside of him, there's not another either starting defensive lineman or rotational defensive lineman who has a pass rush win percentage above double digits, above 10%. So this whole unit, it feels like, is just not coming together and playing well. And so whether it's the cornerback room and the defensive line room for Green Bay right now are their two biggest draft needs. As I'm sitting here starting to get into mock drafts and think about what team needs are and everything, those are the two areas for Green Bay that are their biggest drawbacks right now. And I think in this game in particular, as a matchup that matters, going up against San Francisco's passing weapons, and then, of course, them getting after Brock Purdy as well, I don't know if they have the firepower. They have not shown it so far this season. So, I'd be leaning the Niners in this one, even with how good Green Bay's offense can be. I think that San Francisco is going to have their way with Green Bay's defense a little bit here.
Yeah, that was kind of my biggest question mark coming out of the bye for Green Bay, was how are you going to address not being able to get pressure up front? Because that was, to your point, those Xavier McKinney takeaways and the takeaways of the defense overall, which kind of had this cluster, and I think still ranks in the top 5 in takeaways overall, that masked a lot of these other issues where you were like, okay, they're taking the ball away, which is really the most effective way to play defense. But at the same time, what are you doing in between those? It was very feast or famine for this Green Bay Packers defense. And now coming out of the bye where, listen, they shipped off Preston Smith because, again, to your point, again, the scheme fit. Defensive schemes are more fluid than ever. Even in a 3-4 defense, you're in a 4-down front. And when you're in your nickel package, like all of that is very fluid. But where you run into issues is when you have guys that are built for certain roles in those schemes that no longer fit that kind of criteria. So Preston Smith was a perfect example of a guy that's a great 3-4 outside backer, not so much a 4-3 D end. So that's where you wanted to see, all right, you shipped him off. You're no longer trying to fit a square peg into a round hole when it comes to him and trying to get him involved in all the other stuff. Can you now maximize the talent that you do have and let them settle into their roles a little bit more between Rashawn Gary, Lucas Van Ness? He's been relatively quiet. And then some of those guys up front. The Packers defense did end up, that last drive of Chicago's, started that drive out with back-to-back sacks. So they had 3 sacks in this game against Chicago. They were able to get a little bit more pressure, but was that more of a symptom of, the Bears being a little bit more discombobulated with all of the shifts that they were going through, having a young quarterback? They did get their tackles back on their offensive line, but Tevin Jenkins wasn't in there. Did that play a role? All that kind of stuff. Now, just like we were saying about the Bears, do it again. Packers, do it again.
Sure.
You have to get after Brock Purdy. But my plus factor for this game in particular is going to be the Packers overall on offense have to be better in the red zone. And more specifically, they need to be better in goal-to-go situations because they are converting just 64.71% of the time inside the 10. Not just the 20, inside the 10. So that ranks 23rd in the league at this point. And that is just unacceptable for all of the offensive talent that you have. And for having a quarterback like Jordan Love, who was one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league, you need to punch it in from inside the 10. I already talked about, the Christian Watson play that went for 60 yards. The Packers didn't end up with points on that drive because they turned the ball over on downs inside the 10. I think it was the 3-yard line, in fact. And I supported going for it at that point and punching the ball in and trying to put the game away right then and there. I love that aggressiveness, but back it up. Good Lord, you can't turn the ball over on downs to the Bears at home when give them life. And for all intents and purposes, it did give them life. And they were very close to winning that game. And that would have been something that you looked back on and said, oh, hey, that could have gone a lot better. So red zone touchdown efficiency in general, too, is lacking. The Packers are at an even 50%, which ranks 23rd in the league as well. It's just about those scoring opportunities. You need to score points. You can go up and down the field all you want, but if you're not getting into the end zone, it doesn't matter.
Cardinals and Seahawks, another divisional matchup here in the afternoon slate. Cardinals currently have a 1-game lead on the Niners, the Seahawks, and the Rams, sitting there all at 5-5, and then the Cardinals are 6-4 at the top of the division. So obviously, this goes without saying, this one's a big deal. It's in Seattle, quite the home field advantage that the Seahawks always have when they are at home. What's your matchup that matters, Carmen?
It's the one that I'm most excited to watch, and it's Marvin Harrison Jr. against Devon Witherspoon. I
hope we get it a lot. I really do.
Oh my God.
I really
I hope so
we
too.
get it a lot.
I really do too, because Devon Witherspoon has been a guy that I loved him coming out of Illinois. As someone who grew up outside Chicago, I was forced to apply to University of Illinois, but I have a soft spot for the Illini, and you just don't see that many guys really come out and do well in this league, much less elite players like Devon Witherspoon is. So I really, and him going up against Marvin Harrison Jr., I just think it's going to be a really cool matchup between two very young players. At this point, Marvin Harrison Jr., 79.4 PFF grade, that's 19th among receivers, 499 yards, that's 31st among receivers. He's got 24 catches gaining a first down, 16 catches gaining 15 or more yards, and that's tied for 15th among wide receivers. So he is capable of the big play. Kyler wants to get him the ball, but then is Devon Witherspoon going to stand up to that? And he's had just 15 catches allowed for a first down this year, 4 forced incompletions. I would love to see him I can't wait to see who gets the better of each other at this point in this battle, because I think it's going to be really fun.
I will go other side of things, I want to talk about the Cardinals defensive backs. No one necessarily in particular, but it's how their defense is played against the deep ball this season. When you look at the Cardinals, 11 completions of 20 or more yards down the field. That's the 7th fewest in the NFL. They're going up against a quarterback that wants to throw it deep. Geno Smith has been an absolute flamethrower this season. And it doesn't matter whether it's in the first quarter or the fourth quarter, the first drive or the last drive, Geno is looking deep, especially when DK Metcalf is in the lineup. So when you look at Geno Smith on throws of 20 or more yards, he is top 10 in attempts. He is tied for 6th in completions. He is 5th in total yards, and he is 3rd in total touchdowns. And so that is an area where he is very comfortable, very confident, very willing to look deep down the field at all times. Jackson Smith-Njigba is playing like one of, if not the best slot receiver in the NFL. DK Metcalf has an incredibly high successful percentage against single coverage. It is a recipe where you're looking at a strength on strength, and you're looking at a defense with Jonathan Gannon, calling the shots there that, okay, they have clearly made an emphasis to not get beat deep, to not get beat over the top. And they're playing a team now at home that knows the power of hitting those kinds of deep passes, not just in the individual yards that you gain on that singular play, but the momentum that you create, the confidence you instill in the rest of the team, and how much you could put even a divisional opponent on their heels. So this could be a very fun game. This could be a lot of fireworks in this one. I know I just said that the Cardinals have been good at defending it, but Geno is somebody who can sometimes break those trends because of how willing he has been to attack deep down the field and give some really good receivers a chance to go up and get it. So to me, it is the Cardinals defensive backs versus the deep ball that to me will tell the story in this game. My plus factor, though, as he has been many times this season, has been Trey McBride. The Seahawks, and this is another interesting matchup because Trey McBride, 84.1 receiving grade this season. That's 3rd amongst tight ends. George Kittle and Brock Bowers, the only 2 tight ends who have a higher receiving grade so far this season. But I found it very interesting. The Seahawks linebackers and safeties. So if you clump those guys together, those are typically the players that are covering tight ends. The Seahawks have a 72.8 coverage grade with those groups of players. That is the 4th highest coverage grade in the NFL. So it really is a strength on strength here with how the Seahawks have defended the tight end position, and then also how the Cardinals have defended the deep ball. Those two sides of the ball and those two players specifically, I think are going to mean a lot to this matchup. What is your plus factor here?
Yeah, going back to something you mentioned just before, Jackson Smith-Njigba, but Jackson Smith-Njigba in the slot, because his stats blow everyone else out of the water. He has 50 catches, which is 8 more than any other player in the slot, 572 yards from the slot, which is 83 more than any other player, 28 catches gaining a first down from the slot, 4 more than any other player. He has 14 catches gaining 15 or more yards, which is, again, first, leading the league from the slot. There is nobody better as far as a slot receiver goes right now playing football than Jackson Smith-Njigba. And I just think that is so much of a safety net for Geno Smith. He wants to throw it downfield. And this doesn't preclude him from doing that for Jackson Smith-Njigba out of the slot. But like on so many more of those intermediate routes, those crossers, all that kind of stuff where you can just go wild when you're starting out of that position on the field. Jackson Smith-Njigba has just become such a mainstay for Geno Smith in this offense. And that having him going really is the best indicator that the Seattle Seahawks offense is going. So I really think that he is the definition of a plus factor.
Yeah, no, he is. There's no doubt about it there either. Let's go to primetime games. Sunday Night Football is Philadelphia Eagles and the Los Angeles Rams. Rams have been in quite a few very exciting games lately. Obviously, the Eagles are coming off a Thursday night victory against the Commanders. Your matchup that matters. I'll let you have the floor here to start the talk about these two teams. What do you got?
Yeah, look at me. I'm going the fun, flashy positions here. I'm going corners and wide receivers, specifically Rams wide receivers against Philly corners. I love Quinyon Mitchell. Talk about really young corners that I just love watching play. Him and Darius Slay. Quinyon Mitchell has allowed 291 yards in coverage, receiving yards in coverage. Darius Slay 189. So these guys are stingy. And they're going to be going up against Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp, who are such a wonderful 1-2 punch for the Rams with Matthew Stafford. And I do think that it's going to come down to, can you limit these guys? Because that is the Rams offense right now, and rightfully so. I look at especially the deep play potential from both of these guys in Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. They both have 11 catches, gaining 15 or more yards, which, they both missed some time and stuff like that. So you see the daggers more often than not come from this long ball. It just seems like there's always one. In these really dramatic Rams games that are back and forth, there's always the one long pass to Cooper Kupp. And if he's allowed to complete it, the Rams win. This is not a scientific stat. This is not whatever. This is just, if you allow that one play to Cooper Kupp when it's back and forth, then you're going to get burned. And so can Darius Slay or Quinyon Mitchell keep a lid on it?
They've played really well. And then obviously, you throw in Cooper DeJean as well from the slot, who I think is playing very, very well. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua love to operate from the slot as well. So, yeah, I'm not giving you any sort of crap for picking the flashy matchup in that one. It deserved to be talked about. One of us had to talk about it. Yeah. I will go to the trenches, and I'm going to talk about the Rams defensive line versus the Eagles offensive line. Eagles offensive line over the last 3 or 4 years has been one of the best, if not the best, in the NFL at certain points in time. I think that this year you can certainly make a case for them being one of the best in the NFL, if not the best in the NFL, when the guys are fully healthy, especially those offensive tackles. Rams defensive line, though, it's a young group, right? It's Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, who are the rookies there. You throw Tyler Davis in there as well, the 6th round pick from Clemson. But then it's Kobe Turner, it's Byron Young, it's Bobby Brown. It's a young defensive line full of guys who are playing on rookie contracts, but they're playing so well. 6th highest graded defensive line all season, and they are the 3rd highest graded defensive line over the last month. So forget the veteran savviness. I mean, these young guys are coming together and playing extremely well. Now, there's a difference between coming together and playing extremely well against most offensive lines.
Right.
And then doing it against a unit that has been very familiar with one another, has a lot of veteran savviness to them, and just a lot of damn overall talent with the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line. Eagles offensive line, they're 2nd in overall blocking grade. They're 8th in passing grade. They're 2nd in run blocking grade. This is a group that has played very, very well when they are fully healthy. And so this will be the toughest test yet for a young Rams defensive line, or one of their toughest tests, I should say. And I'm really looking forward to it because they're on a roll. They're one of the best defensive lines over the last month, like I mentioned. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Specifically, I can't wait to see Jared Verse against these offensive tackles. That is something that I'm really looking forward to, because Verse, in my opinion, is the front runner for defensive player of the year. I know there's some other, defensive rookie of the year, I should say. I know there are a lot of
going against the other one that's in this game.
I mean, right, Quinyon Mitchell. I was going to say that the top 3 right now is basically Andrew Phillips for the New York Giants. It's Quinyon Mitchell from the Philadelphia Eagles, and then it's Jared Verse for the Los Angeles Rams. So I think this is going to be a fun matchup in that regard. What about plus factor? What do you got for plus factors in this game?
Yeah, it goes right along with it, but I'll expand upon it because Howie Roseman knows what he's doing. He builds through the trenches. That's historically been how this Eagles team has been built under him as the general manager, which I am in full support of. And it's because of the fact that you now have a quarterback too. Jalen Hurts has gotten into kind of that MVP conversation. He's been playing really, really well. It cannot be overstated how much that hinges on the guys in front of him keeping him clean, because Jalen Hurts, when under pressure, has the 20th ranked passing grade, just a 36.6, 3rd most turnover worthy plays with 9, and he has the 6th fewest passing yards per attempt when under pressure. So Jalen Hurts is not the quarterback that we're talking about when we're talking about him in the MVP race if he is under pressure. And he has the luxury of being kept clean, given the fact that he is behind one of the best offensive lines in football, and has been behind one of the best offensive lines in football, because that is such a priority for this Eagles organization, and it's why I love them for it. But there is a potential there then, if you can get past this offensive line, you can very much affect Jalen Hurts and therefore this Eagles offense overall. Can Jared Verse do that? Can Kobe Turner do that? Braden Fisk, any of these guys, like you said, they're young, they're hungry, they're ready to go. this is like, it's not the path of least resistance by any means, but it might be the most effective way to get to the Eagles and stop them from scoring points is simply get to Jalen Hurts. It's easier said than done, but if you can do it, that's the plus factor.
I have a question. What
Yes.
year did you become what year did you start working with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I can't remember what year.
2016.
Okay. So, all right. So when you say the words young and hungry, anytime anybody out there says the words young and hungry in that succession, I immediately have PTSD to when Raheem Morris was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and he nicknamed their defensive group Youngry and young and hungry, and Bucs fans everywhere. I feel like all Bucs fans who lived through that moment, and shout out Raheem. I'm glad that he's got another chance as a head coach. I really do. This is not like a shot at Raheem at all whatsoever in any way. He was a young coach. He was trying to give his group a cool nickname, but he came up with Youngry, and the group was bad. they were not good. And I remember the early days of Twitter.
I was there for Dirk Cutter's first year as head coach.
Okay, all right. I just wondered if you had experienced the Youngry PTSD.
I did not. But I heard wonderful things about Raheem. From everybody loved him in that.
I'm very happy that Raheem has another opportunity to get to be a head coach in this league, because I thought it was unfair how he was set up in Tampa. It was sort of a situation where they needed somebody, so they elevated a young coach who they liked, who just he wasn't ready. He wasn't quite ready yet, and he's ready now. I'm happy.
He had to test out some more of those nicknames.
He did.
Test that out before
we all
you
do,
bring it to the public.
Right.
We all make mistakes.
My plus factor in this one is the Rams cornerbacks. The Eagles run what I call the Saquon Barkley offense, where everything that they do.
How did you come up with that name?
Yeah, they run the Youngry offense is what they do. I call it the Youngry offense. Saquon is the focal point of every single thing that the Eagles do, and they complement him in two different ways. One of them is with the tush push, right? Anytime they are in 3rd and 3 or less, they feel like they have a good chance to gain a first down. So it's Saquon Barkley. It's how he can get him the football on 1st and 2nd down. Not that it's always a run. I'm not trying to say that, but that's the main part of their game plan. And so they complement it with the tush push, and then they also complement it with shot plays deep down the field. They've got one of the best in the NFL and A.J. Brown at it. Devontae Smith's fantastic at it as well. The Rams cornerbacks, not so great at covering it. A 29.6 coverage grade on passes of 15 or more yards this season. That's 31st in terms of coverage grade on those deep passes in the NFL. That's not good, because if you're going to have success against the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, you'd love to stop Saquon Barkley. Not many teams, if any, have been able to do so this season. What you really want to try to stop is those complementary things and say, okay, well, is Saquon enough to beat us? Can we outscore just Saquon? Because it's really hard to outscore Saquon and Jalen Hurts in the short yardage, and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith in the shot plays. If they let those shot plays happen, if you've got like 3, 4, 5 of those 15, 20-yard passes to those guys, it's going to be tough to keep up with them, even with an offense like the Los Angeles Rams have. But if you limit it to 1 or 2 shot plays, now you got a chance. Now we're talking about you're changing the math in your favor. So to me, the plus factor is the Rams cornerbacks. Can they play better against those deep shots than they have so far this season? Last game, it's the Har Bowl. It is the Baltimore Ravens versus the Los Angeles Chargers, a rematch of Super Bowl coaches and brothers going up against each other.
I'm old enough to remember when this happened in the Super Bowl between these two brothers.
Very excited that these two coaches, certainly, John Harbaugh's been here the whole time, but that Jim Harbaugh is back and we get this matchup. And I'm very excited that it's with two good teams, right? The Ravens are a team that are threatening for the 1 seed in the AFC. I wouldn't say the Chargers are threatening for the 1 seed, but they're certainly in playoff position a lot sooner than what people thought they would be. They've got the number 1 defense in the NFL statistically. They've got a quarterback who's absolutely on fire, and they're hosting a really good Ravens football team. So your matchup that matters here for Monday Night Football, what do you got?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, decides to attack Lamar Jackson, because Lamar Jackson is one of the best, is the best quarterback, in fact, against the blitz. He's got an 87.4 PFF grade against the blitz, which ranks first. 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's got 64 completions, gaining a first down. That also leads the league. But this is the fun part, is that the Chargers don't really do that. They don't blitz. They already have blitz at one of the lowest rates in the league, just 25.7% of passing plays. And yet, 37 sacks generated, that's tied for fourth. They have 190 pressures, that's top 10, and it's a rank of ninth. 15 offensive touchdowns allowed, which is the fewest. They have the number one scoring defense in the league, allowing just an average of 14.5 points per game. That is, to say that in week 12 is incredible. It really, really is. And this is just something that you really need to limit Lamar Jackson. And what you happen to do well is something that could potentially be the it factor or be the matchup that matters against Lamar, because you're not just going to try and overload him, because that doesn't work. And you know that doesn't work, but you've been able to get pressure with 4. So that's something I think is going to be absolutely crucial for this Chargers defense.
I'm looking up a number really quick because I wanted to build off of what you said when it comes to Lamar versus the blitz. So this is an article by Bradley Locker, who writes for us at PFF, and he was looking at how. Remember how last week I said that Mike Tomlin plays Lamar better than basically anybody out there? Well, that came to fruition again last week, and they were able to limit Lamar, and Lamar looked very, very uncomfortable. And so Bradley wrote an article where he was looking at certain numbers, because you're totally right that Lamar plays really well against the blitz, but it still worked for the Steelers last week. It's from that article, which you guys can see at pff.com, but I'll read you some of the numbers here. The season average blitz rate for the Pittsburgh Steelers before week 11 was 28.1%. Against Lamar, it was 41.7. So it was a much higher blitz rate than it had been previously throughout the season. And then since 2021, if you want to take it back, the Steelers played a lot of man coverage against Lamar last week. They played a lot of cover 1. Lamar's passing versus man coverage over the last, 3 seasons, a 68.4. Against zone, it's all the way up to an 89.4. So blitzing and playing man coverage actually worked for the Steelers when it has not worked against a lot of other teams specifically. Like you mentioned, Lamar's been great against the blitz. Yeah. But I think it's when you time and combine that man coverage with the blitz that was really, it had him very uncomfortable last week. Now, something that is worth noting, the Chargers don't do a lot of that. They don't play a lot of single coverage. They don't play a lot of cover 1. And they don't feel like they have to blitz a ton. They play a lot of cover 3. They play a lot of quarters. And so does Jesse Minter want to switch up how they have been playing this season because it has been so successful? And does he think he has the personnel to do so, even if he wants to? Because that's another part of this equation. So I thought that was very fascinating, looking at Bradley's article and then parsing that with what the Chargers naturally have done so far this season. They haven't really done that, but neither did the Steelers a ton up until last week. So they were able to up what they did in the blitz category and the cover 1 category, playing a lot more man coverage. Will the Chargers follow suit? So I think that is that's something that I'm going to look out for. I think another element to that is Jackson scrambled just one time for 0 yards, which was the first time that Lamar Jackson scrambled for 0 yards since 2022. So it'd been quite a while. So very clearly the Pittsburgh Steelers did a great job at containing him. And I think that is something that Jesse Minter does not want to do, is let Lamar Jackson out of the pocket without a spy being right there to really close in on him. So that I think that he will try to do, but can he do the rest in coverage? That's something I'll pay attention to. Your plus factor here in this game, what you got?
So that is really interesting. And have the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of figured out a blueprint to play Lamar Jackson?
I don't know. I don't know if we can call it that.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can call it that, but again, is there a way where you can rattle Lamar?
Right. There's something to that if they switched up their tendencies that drastically. And maybe it was the sole fact that they switched up their tendencies that drastically and that the Ravens offense was looking for one thing and just didn't get it. Maybe that was part of it too. Who knows? Fascinating stuff, though. Again, very interested then to see how Jesse Minter decides to play Lamar Jackson. But going to the other side of things, I have been picking this man as a plus factor for various points throughout the season, and it's finally paying off, and that is Ladd McConkey, my friend. I am so pumped that listen, his stats the last 3 weeks, okay? 5th best receiving grade among qualified wide receivers. He's gained a first down on all 8 of his catches, and 7 of the 8 have been explosive plays. He has a 21.9 yard per reception average in that span. And this is also, he only has a 20% threat percentage, which ranks 24th among qualified wide receivers. I'm like, hey, get him the ball more. That's what I want, because now I'm right, which I love being. But it's my plus factor for this offense that has now opened up, because I think in the beginning of the season, you saw a lot of what you were expecting to see out of a Jim Harbaugh offense, which was very kind of conservative, that really physical brand of football. Again, the ground and pound. J.K. Dobbins, so happy for him. He's been so just the workhorse for this season, and he's been so steady and so solid. Couldn't say enough about J.K. Dobbins, but you need to open up this offense when you have Justin Herbert, and that's exactly what the Chargers have been doing over the past few weeks. And it's resulted in this surge of Vlad McConkey, and I loved him coming out. I thought he was going to be great, and now he is going to be great because he's got Justin Herbert throwing him the ball, and this offense is clicking kind of more in the vision of what you think that it should be, given the fact who their quarterback is and just kind of the personnel that they have.
The plus factor for me is still Justin Herbert. I mean, I could have gone with the 2 offensive linemen. I think the offensive tackle duo is playing really, really well. I wanted to shout them out. But since week 7, Herbert's had an elite passing grade. He's got 17 big-time throws. He's got 2 turnover-worthy plays. I mean, it's stupid, folks. I mean, it's just a crazy rate of big-time throws and turnover-worthy plays, 7 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Last week, he led the team in rushing. I mean, it's just, it's unbelievable what he is able to do. Justin Herbert is playing like an MVP. And I think that if they're able to win on his shoulders against the Baltimore Ravens, we're going to start talking about it a lot more as him being not just sort of this distant MVP, somebody who is in the running, maybe a top 3 guy already because of how well he has played over the last month. So wanted to hat tip Justin Herbert, because at this point in time, he is the plus factor for any game that they go up against, because he's given his team a chance to win every single week. It's a great combination that they have with obviously running the ball very well. You got a good offensive line, defense is playing great behind you, and then you throw in a top 5 quarterback in the world. Pretty good combination. So I'm excited to see this rematch of Jim and John Harbaugh going at it. You know, this one's a little personal for these guys.
Who's got it better than us?
Who's got it better than us when we get to watch a game like this? Nobody. Appreciate everybody watching and listening to the preview show this week. If you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you go to pff.com and get yourself one. Subscribe.pff.com is also a link that will get you there. Holiday season might be a little bit different when it comes to when we've got the preview show coming out. I think Thanksgiving might be along the same schedule, but I'm just kind of getting ahead of things. Like Christmas might be a little bit different. So make sure you guys are just watching out for that. Hit notifications on the YouTube channel. And so you know that like when we're going live and when things start to go live and everything, because we would love to continue to talk with you guys every single week as we preview every game in the NFL. For Carmen Vitali, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you guys same time next week. See you guys then.